What was it about your studies and background, your academic training, that led you to recognize Philip as being an extraordinary guy?
Well, I was trained at University of California, San Diego. I'm a sociologist. And I had done my research on in-depth ethnographic research on social change movements and groups of people that are aspiring to make change, personal change, and change in the world we live in. And so I had spent many years with in-depth interviews of people on how it affects their lives and meaning and change at a spiritual level, at a personal growth level, human potential movement, that kind of thing. So I had met and been exposed to many people who had attained those goals, and especially spiritual goals. Yogananda's people, Paramahansa Yogananda and Self-Realization Fellowship, monks and nuns and lay disciples was the subject of my dissertation. And the practice of meditation and what happens when people truly commit themselves to a particular way of life, different than the one they were raised in, and how it affects their families, their children, their marriages, their how they vote. It was an in-depth study. So I learned a lot about some of the higher beings, that some of what we may call saints, and but in that tradition, spiritual tradition, it's yoga. And so when I met Philip, I had been trained for 20 years in a discipline, in understanding what people are able to manifest internally, but you cannot see. And after many years of research and writing, I developed an expertise. And when I met Philip, I was able to see that there was something extraordinary about him and his commitment and his vitality and his concern and his stature that I didn't know about when I met him. I met him before I knew what he stood for, but I recognized it as something very grand, very high, very purposeful for people, but also all of nature, animals, trees, and the earth itself.
In a very practical sense, what did you see Philip demonstrate that convinced you of that?
Well, once I understood a little more about which I learned very quickly that his cause was my cause, that I'd prepared for that since I was a child. My connection with nature is intense and has always been. And I saw here he was on a he was on a train that isn't going to stop towards solving some of the problems that were worrying me for decades. Like how are we going to solve some of the problems for our, not just our society, I'm a sociologist, our social institutions. What are we going to do? And of course, personal transformation of people. How are we going to succeed at what we're so diligently trying to accomplish for our own growth? And then how are we going to survive the planetary changes that we're facing? And I saw that he had documented his abilities in Europe in the best labs and universities. I read about his track record and what he could do with hundreds of thousands of people, children, animals, and he brought what they call healing. He brought major change, transformation at the internal level, spiritual level, if you will, existential level, but that manifested at the physical level, the psychological, emotional level. He has a track record of being tested in Europe, and then we went about testing him in the U.S. The claims that Philip was making in his writings and the newspaper media reports of Philip and his abilities were so enormous, they had to be taken seriously. And I know from my research, for 20 years of research, with people of higher powers, let us say, that these things are possible. Now, to see them in a person, in a human body, claiming that he has those powers and can actually do them, I knew it was possible. I didn't think I'd ever meet that person. And there he was. His appearance was timely. We're in a critical time. I knew that. So there's got to be a solution.
Well, no, just this idea that his timing is not coincidental or significant. The timing of his presence and skills are not coincidental, but are quite
auspicious.
Yeah.
From what I knew from my training, research, and my own life, we're in a crisis. And when there's a crisis of this magnitude, there has to be a solution. I knew that. There are many, many people on this planet working hard and praying hard, hoping hard, and in the environmental movement, in all walks of life, yearning for a solution and expecting to be part of that solution. But we didn't have a solution. And as soon as I met Philip, I knew we had a solution, and it was up to us to use him. Up to me to use him. Because I was speaking of me. I met him. It was very clear what to do.
The idea of using him is, I think it's very interesting. I mean, when you say use it, it's up to us to use him. Isn't it possible for him to just do whatever the hell he wants? Or is it up to us to use him? Those are two different... Here's this wise guy and he knows everything, and he can act and do what he wants. But to put it in the terms that it's up to us to use him puts a different spin on it. Can you help me understand the difference?
Well, as you know, the people, beings, teachers, whoever, have come to this earth to help the human population throughout our history, have come with an assignment. They've come with a purpose. They cannot impose that purpose on us. Jesus Christ is a Christ of the West. He cannot impose what he wanted to impose on the human race. He had to be there for them to, in his case, follow. That's not what we're doing here. Use him. Use his teachings. Use what he's saying and make it our own. That's how any teacher teaches. I'm a professor. You can't teach anybody anything. You have to help them learn what it is they want to learn. The human race has to want to solve these problems. There's people hope there's enough of us that do want to do that. Well, we have to be able to. The tools have to be there. And frankly, we don't have them. And I knew that. It was a very disconcerting future that I was facing each month, each year. How are we going to make the changes that are necessary?
Great. When you read his literature and his history, can you very briefly, just summarize what that early history, when you first met him, when you began to familiarize yourself with his early history, what were the key markers of that impressed you?
He's a scientist. He's a paleontologist. And he is a well-respected, a well-known, although...
Let's start again because of the buzzsaw downstairs.
Mm-hmm.
Just right, he's a scientist, just begin with
that. He's a scientist and well-known for his work in paleontology. Radical, but well-respected. He was known for his work in law enforcement, criminology. He was known for his eco-humanitarian work. He saved the lives of many extinct species, rainforests, animals, endangered groups, including endangered peoples, indigenous peoples, social and political, sexual groups, gay, lesbian, religious groups that are persecuted. He championed the cause in the name of justice for all those people. That's very dear to me, and personally and academically. So I was, of course, not only impressed, I was keen to help, support, be part of that.
Change the camera.
And he's a doer. He's a doer, not a talker. And that impresses me. I am a doer. So I was keen to be part of that. Since then, we've been working partners. It's been 8 years.
Let's talk briefly about some of the, I'm going to say some of the research projects that were done in Europe having to do with the health and physical health issues that he might help me understand, in a very brief general sense, what are, we're going to say, his powers or his skills? What makes him unique? What can he do that other people can't do?
Well, he was extremely famous in Europe. He stole the show on all the TV and press and media for his accomplishments. And healing is what they call it, the unbelievable healer. He was on TV shows that drew audience response, 12 million viewers, equivalent of 70 million in US terms. That's a lot of people watching one guy. And why are they watching? Because he could do what no one else could do. He begins where the medical profession ends. When the medical doctors do what they can do, and we work always with medical doctors, he always has. What he does, medical science cannot do. What they can do, he does not. And what they cannot do is what he can. He does what reductionist science cannot do. It's beyond what we can see and touch. The five senses that we're working within in the scientific paradigm that we have. It actually is a science, what Philip is doing. He calls it a subliminal science and technology. There are laws to that science. And if you know the laws to that science, you can then apply it in a technology. So it's a non-physical medicine, and in terms of what he was so famous for, it's a non-physical medicine. People were interested in healing. And so he was well known for being able to bring about effects that affected the physical well-being of the recipient, and extremely famous for them. One case, cancer, of course, all kinds of emotional problems, psychological problems. People, spoke about them. There's letters, there's testimonies, there's documents on TV of people, hundreds of thousands of people and animals that he brought about so-called healing. Philip had been tested in the major universities and laboratories in Europe. He had developed a very widespread reputation for what we would call healing. It's actually a science. He was the father of subliminal influentiality and the technology of subliminal distant influence technology. He was known for the effects of that in the laboratories, in the universities. His reputation as a media person with articles in the press, radio, and TV. It culminated in 1990 when he was invited as a special guest on the most popular French TV host show on an independent TV station, TF1. And he appeared on that show with several people that he had taken care of, people that suffering from cancer, all the way from cancer, depression, family, a man representing his family, everyone in his family, wife, daughter, himself had been helped. It was, I think, the first time it was exposed publicly that he could do this at a distance. A person was there telling about a friend who had not met Philip, but he worked from a distance on this person. That was a child, I think. And the most significant one on that show was the most impressive, although there had been many, many stories in the papers about what he had done with animals, race horses, rescue dogs, farm animals. That was well known. One of the most remarkable cases that appeared on that show was the mother with the child. I guess he was about 1. The child had been diagnosed by medical doctors as having cystic fibrosis, which is a genetic disease. And Philip took care of that baby, the child in the womb, and the baby was born without any trace of cystic fibrosis, nor was it evident in the mother's genetic structure anymore. Now, that was a premiere in genetic treatment. And that was pretty astounding. It was the first public exposure of that case. That also was on another TV show, actually, where Philip appeared in a debate with a professor of medicine. And as I said before, Philip always worked with doctors and still does. And the doctor was very respectful of Philip, very well known. They knew each other. And where the medical domain ends and they cannot help after a certain point, that's where Philip comes in and brings about what look like so-called miracles. They're actually not miracles. They're actually the application of a higher science that he manifests in our reality. After that TV show was run in December 1990, the reaction was overwhelming, as you can imagine. 12 million people watching that show, most of which had somebody they knew or loved suffering or dying. The letters came pouring in. The TV station eventually was forced to give his phone number, and people called and shut down the phone lines in Brittany. The response was so overwhelming, trying to reach this famous Breton healer. As a result, hundreds of thousands of letters came pouring in to Philippe Sauvage to help the people. He took care of as many as he could. He had to qualify them. He couldn't take care of them all. And set up an organization to do so, to help sort who would be the best candidates to take care of. As a result, an organization was set up. Philip took care of as many of those people as he could. Also, as a result, Philip went to Greenland and set up his archaeofuturistic center, kind of a dream coming true, where people could come to Greenland in the pure wilderness, one of the ones that's left on the planet, where they could be processed there in a pure state. So it was an extraordinary thing to offer, and then an extraordinary thing to accomplish. He also represented the most significant historic religious freedom case or application of the First Amendment.
I just want to pick up this First Amendment issue.
Yeah. When Philip came to the United States, he was seeking political asylum from persecution for the practice of his science and his healing. Philip Sauvage actually represents the most historic and significant religious freedom case in American history. That's my field. I'm a sociologist. I documented this. The application of the U.S. Constitution, First Amendment to the U.S. Constitution, freedom of speech, thought, and religion. He was protected vociferously under our Constitution against French persecution. And it's a very rare and extraordinary case. One of the consequences of that legal case was an extradition hearing, and the U.S. judge, Moskowitz, refused to extradite Philip back to France, stating vociferously that there was no evidence of a crime, and even if it was a crime in France, it is not a crime in the United States. So it was quite an exoneration, and out of that, people sought after Philip, media, scientists, doctors, and he worked with them. and he was ready to commit and help them in every way he could. It was a very exciting time. It was a long and horrendous legal battle, and to seek political asylum from France was almost impossible. But in the process, there was so much support, and so much support from the French people that he had helped. So there were support committees established in France and support committees established in the US. And out of that effort, so many politicians, doctors, scientists, academics, people rallied to his support. So it was a very exciting and fruitful time, actually, even amidst the horrendous persecution. That's how we all heard about Philip.
What was the first formal study that you helped initiate or participated in the U.S. with Philip?
Yeah. One of the first things I did with Philip, working with Philip, was to bring about what we call empirical study, a double-blind study on people with severe third-degree burns. Call it the burn study. And we eventually did the study. It involved children, severe third-degree burns. The purpose of it was to document his technology in an area that medical science cannot treat. According to medical doctors, severe third-degree burns cannot heal. There can be no reepithelialization of the skin. If there could be, it would be called a severe second-degree burn. So when a severe third-degree burn shows any reepithelialization of skin from any treatment, that documents something impossible has happened. And that's exactly what we did. It was a double-blind study, and the effects on the children in the treatment group were so dramatic, 100% healing response, reepithelialization of skin, no harmful side effects, no placebo. They didn't know, they didn't believe in any healer. They were children, some were under 1 year old. That the results were absolutely extraordinary.
Tell me briefly about the children that were not treated.
The children that were not treated, it was a double-blind study. It turned out we had a control group not by our own intention. There were several children that were not treated because the staff at the burn center didn't tell us. And of course, the normal reaction, the normal results for children with third-degree burns took place in that control group. In 2 severe cases, a fire burn, the 2 children died. And others, the third-degree burns didn't heal. They needed grafting. And in the treatment group, the children that were treated, there was no need for grafting. The wounds were healing in front of the doctor's eyes. Another one that we did, which was a clinical trial, was on a virus, a herpes virus, called shingles, herpes zoster. And it is a dreadful thing to have, personally. The itching and the pain involved is so traumatic. One woman told me when I was looking for subjects for this demonstration, she told me, I've had 5 children, and I've had shingles once, and I'd rather have 5 more children than ever have shingles again. That said it to me. I didn't know much about shingles. Well, the results of this were equally dramatic. The people that wound up in our little study were in New York. Philip was in San Diego. We were in San Diego. And the doctor called with 2 people whose wives were suffering terribly from shingles. So he gave me the information on the people, which is minimum, name, birthday, place of birth, and I said I would ask Philip for help. And I did. Within an hour, his report is written up. Within an hour, the pain and the itching was subsiding. Within 3 hours, it was virtually gone. The next day, they were like astounded. So I asked the doctor, what do the people say? And he goes, well, frankly, they're miffed. I said, only in New York. Why are they miffed? It's because they don't understand. I said, well, I don't either. Who understands this? It's a new science, new technology for us. And that's why we're studying it. That's why we're documenting it. It's truly extraordinary. It turns out, after 8 years of working with Philip, I am there's no question, it's the most powerful technology we have. Those are two of the research protocols that I've worked with Philip. Fire burn, and virus, herpes virus. I have seen so many things in 8 years. I have seen treatment of people, not as a study, but as a private case, demonstration, patients, with just about everything you can imagine. From cancer to brain tumors to heart disease to crippling effects of some, operation or mistake or accident, kidney failure. I have seen the restoration of vision, of things that are simply impossible according to medical standards. And it has been, I don't say unbelievable anymore or amazing. And he doesn't. He says it is not extraordinary. In each one of us are these healing powers, these ability to self-heal, this, in our original blueprint, whatever that is, we were not degenerating beings. We were regenerating beings, and we're supposed to be able to utilize those abilities and powers. And the fact that we don't, obviously, and cannot, and have lived for so many, millennia, with these limitations, doesn't mean we're supposed to have them. We are. And he awakens them, empowers, enhances, removes the pain, the fear. That alone liberates being to many degrees, psychologically, emotionally, and the effects show physically. He calls it healthening. Healthening is a state of wholeness, of wellness, of balance, homeostasis. It's a state of self-fulfillment, existential purpose and meaning. We're supposed to be in that state. And we're supposed to be able to keep ourselves, maintain that state. What he does is helps the suffering or dying person reconnect with that state and holds them there, protects them, takes care of them as they come into their own ability to bring that about and maintain it. One of the most recent cases has been a person suffering from AIDS for 10 years. And AIDS is a virus. So there's a connection here between what he's doing with the AIDS patient and the shingles patient. It's a virus. Nobody else can touch it. Medical science has no answer for virus. Virus runs its course. The AIDS patient suffered from AIDS for 10 years. Has on a drug regimen that, he carries around in a suitcase. It keeps him going. The last year, before Philip saw this man, his viral load is how they measure the amount of virus that the body's carrying, had stabilized at what they call 37,000 copies. Sometimes it goes up to 100 or 200. So it stabilized with the drugs that he was on. When he went back after receiving Philip's processing, he had 2 independent labs do tests on his viral load. And his viral load report came out with this significant decrease from 37,000 down to less than 50 copies. That's astounding. It's not possible in a day. Several of the most interesting and dramatic cases that I witnessed, along with the other doctors we were working with, involved one, an Alzheimer's patient of a man who could barely walk or talk, Alzheimer's for 5 years. This man, after being treated by Philip once, was able to stand up in a courtroom and demand that the judge give him his business back. Another case was a child working with the doctor that we worked with, who had been born without a corpus callosum, the part of the brain that integrates the left and right hemisphere. This child was born into a Mexican family in East LA, a poor family. They loved the child. He could do nothing. He could not move. And they took care of him, loved him for 4 years. Philip took care of him. Within weeks, this child is sitting up, feeding himself, playing with a puppy that they got, starting to talk. Impossible things without a corpus callosum. The documentary filmmaker who was interviewing Philip and this doctor with this child said, "What did you do, Philip? Did you help regenerate a corpus callosum?" Because no, we bypassed it. So it's this astounding documentation. And doctors are interested in it. Holistic practitioners are interested in it. Scientists are interested in it. And it's a very exciting field. At the California Institute of Human Science, which is where I met Philip, they were doing 2 years of testing on him. They were testing his brain waves. They were testing his before and after of all his patients for 2 years. He broke the records in all cases. In one case, it went off the charts. The chart didn't have a limit for his results. That was a kidney failure. And all of a sudden, after one treatment, bursts of energy into the kidney. The person is revitalized with health that maintained, it's documented, for several years. Also at the California Institute, they have a shielded room. It's called a Faraday cage, and they're very proud of it. There's very few of them built, and it's built to block electromagnetic waves. So the idea, the scientists and physicists and people at the Institute were documenting Philip. So the idea was for Philip to do a processing while in the shielded room. And if there was an effect on the patients, the subjects that he was processing, then it would demonstrate that his technology is not blocked and has almost nothing to do with electromagnetism, which is the basic structure of the physical world. So it's coming from some other technology that we don't have. So that what he is doing is taking place at a much more fundamental level, at the causal level, if you will, but not at the physical or subtle energies level. And that's exactly what happened. The effects were astoundingly dramatic, and documented that Philip does, in fact, take care of the cause of the problem. That's what he's known to do. He goes at the cause, and then the effects show the psychological, emotional, spiritual, and physical. Also, what they did at this institute and at the other institutes in California, other doctors and researchers got in on this and mapped his brain. The EEG standard way, and then another way called the brain mapping. So the results of those tests on his brain were so extraordinary, unusual. In one case, the brain mapping that was done shows a picture of the alpha band, and it increased from resting to processing state 40 times, not 40%, 40 times what it started out as. These scientists had never seen anything like this ever from a human brain. The closest they've ever seen is the alpha band of the large sea mammals, like the whales with their sonar. That's the closest they can come. They cannot link this alpha band with anything that they know. Now the more cutting-edge scientists are trying to link it with a healing state of consciousness, whatever that means, whatever it means to them. That's their research. So they are interested in this. But that's a very extraordinary document. People are dying at very young ages, and they know they don't need to be dying. They don't want to be dying. He's able to help these people. He's able to relieve their suffering and keep them from dying. These are his abilities and powers, whatever you want to call it. It's a technology that is useful to people. So we help these people. We've helped many, many people in the U.S. And now in Europe, we have an organization it's a nonprofit, California corporation, called Catharsis, Bionostic Unit of Geonoetics. The focus of Philip's purpose and intentions here is earth-oriented, ecologically oriented. We don't have a chance if our planet doesn't survive. We're in crisis. He's here to use these powers to help the earth and the people on this earth survive. So what he has to offer is extremely useful, and it's up to people to use it. And we are the people that are using it. So the people that have to do with our organization or that we help, they contribute to our organization. They contribute in the sense of resources. In an individual case, it's like finding the best surgeon, the best lawyer that you can't find anywhere else. Frankly, there is no one else that can do what he's doing. Medical doctors can take you to a certain level, and when they give up, there's nothing more they can do. We take care of those people. And from the resources that they contribute, we then are able to go on with our projects and Philip's projects. I'm a director of those projects, and I am the chairman of the Catharsis organization. One of the most important phases of what we are doing, what Philip is doing, is taken from the individual level, where he's helping individuals or families or groups of people, to a societal level. Any group, any business, any government, any social political cause can use this technology for whatever their agenda is. Philip's agenda is eco-humanitarian. The resources go towards that. The next phase of his work will be implementing and applying this subliminal technology in morphogenic documentation, where we can blend, change, shift the morphogenic composite of large groups of people, large groups of, for instance, criminals, and change them as he changes individuals. As the individuals change, this group will change, where they no longer are interested in acting in criminal ways. Could be called the change in consciousness. The consciousness needs to shift in the human population. People are individually trying to do that. Groups are trying to do that. Many are not trying to do that. It needs to shift. With this technology, we can force a shift in change of consciousness that's so critical for our well-being on the planet. So what we need now is support for Philip's larger eco-humanitarian cause, and it will involve millions. What we're looking for are wealthy people who have a need, who have a family member or themselves suffering, dying, where there's no help from the medical, that want to use Philip. Smart, wealthy people that see what they could have by requesting the help of Philip and his technology for themselves, for their family members, suffering, dying. He can bring them their relief. He can save them from dying. In exchange for 10% of what their worth is. It's a basic tithing for many Westerners anyways. That money would then fund his projects. And it's that kind of exchange that Philip participates in. That's what he is able to do. Give people what they want, what they need, and with what they give to us, to what their contribution is, we can use it for what Philip needs next, and we need to use him for next. Frankly, what we're looking for is a billionaire who desperately needs to save the life of himself or someone he loves. We need labs set up, we need instruments, we need, at the minimal level, we need a computer system that is the finest and the most advanced that human scientists have made, where he can process 20 people at the same time, where he can process 50 people at the same time. With a computer system that exists now, Hollywood has the most advanced computer morphing technology ever produced. The scientists know how to use that equipment. They know how to digitalize morphogenic data. That's what we need to do, to take care of masses of people at the same time and lift the state of consciousness, bring about the changes they so desperately seek, we need to happen on the planet, and in that way help create a shift amongst the human population that will then have an effect on the outcome of the Earth's survival. So basically it's about worth, value. What is it worth to the person at the individual level? What's it worth to us as a collective human race to save ourselves, to save our Earth? Philip, Dr. Savage, is unique. There's no question about it. It's been documented for 30 years. So we need no more proof. We have all the proof anyone could ever ask for. When you need a surgeon, when you need a lawyer, you want the best. When you need this kind of power, technology, you go to the one who has it. He's the one who has it. And he has a team of people he's worked with. He can train people. He can teach people. We have students. We have scientists, medical doctors that have been empowered with this, often in the healing mode, but also in the use of the subliminal technology. He's training a very select group of people to be able to use this in a very extreme and positive way to bring changes where they must take place in the political and social arena. This is how governments can use it. What is it worth to the group, to the business, to the government to bring about their agenda? There's no question he can help. He can accelerate it. He can do what it is they need. Obviously, positive and goals that are going to help their people, whatever it is. His powers can be utilized, especially in specific assignments. His technology is precise. It's laser-like. It's based on theory of, another dimension, a psychocontinuum it's called, a unified field of consciousness. Different scientists use different terms for it, but that's where he's operating from. And from that, he can manifest just about anything that is requested in an accelerated period of time. Mm-hmm. He needs certain parameters, he needs to be given certain data, certain feedback. But it's precise, it's efficient, and it's certain. That's been proven.
So let's talk about the good and evil thing. Can it be used for, let's say, a despot?
It is well known in Philip's writings, and his demonstrations in the last 30 years, that this technology can be used to remove any despot almost immediately, or any terrorist, which is now at the forefront of everybody's mind. For instance, in the case of a terrorist, whoever defines the person as a terrorist, that's the political problem. So just let's say a terrorist that is actively pursuing some harmful agenda. Subjected to Philip's processing, or this technology, his team, that person would come into balance almost instantly, so quickly, and at such an accelerated speed that he couldn't function.
As a terrorist.
He couldn't function at all for a short period of time. And in that malfunctioning, let's say, he would make devastatingly fatal mistakes. He would change his behavior so quickly and radically, he would confuse everyone he's working with. They would see the danger they were under. And if that terrorist were being sought, he would be captured. It'd be easy. So it makes it easy for the government that's trying to capture that terrorist. That's a mission accomplished. He would no longer be able to function in a criminal activity. In the case of a dictator, he would no longer want to. He'd rather step down and be spending time with his family, his loved ones. That's what a human being wants to do. They want to be with their family and their children. They want to be happy and healthy. It's our blueprint. We are supposed to be that. That's our nature. In fact, our nature is giving. Our blueprint, if you will, is happiness, health, balance, service, duty, giving. It's what we want to do. Under this kind of processing at the personal or at the societal level, that's what happens. That's the effects of Philip's processing.